In the year 1917, many things were changing.
The world was beginning to impact us. There wasn't any way that we could just be a country by ourselves on a continent by ourselves. And I think that people were wanting to know more about the world around them, and what better way to do that than to have a library to be able to read about other opinions and not only just good literature, but factual information as well. In 1917, of course, we were just getting into World War I. During that time period, the flu pandemic, the Spanish influenza, was raging through the entire world, so that was impacting locally as well. Back in 1915, Ohio had been pushing to consolidate the schools. Up until that point in time, there had been little one-room schoolhouses all over the place. And then, of course, Prohibition was coming in. So all of those things, as we looked into the Miami Gazette, we did find the local impact. There's pictures of the different men who had gone off to be soldiers. There are little articles about the ladies getting together to knit socks to send overseas. And you could see dry committees popping up all over the place, which were people getting together to try to make sure that Prohibition did actually come into being. So those were the things that were going on in the world, and also, in a microcosm happening here in Waynesville too.
The small town of Waynesville, Ohio, could boast many things: a solid school system, a newspaper of its own, even electric traffic lights. But still, something was missing.
We were just really a modern little country town.
Oh, well, actually, I think that, you were.
Well, I think this town, even though it was at that time, was probably not more than 900 people.
Mm-hmm.
But it was very progressive. We had very forward-thinking people.
I think the people in this community have always valued education. And of course, at that time too, like I said, the schools were centralizing, and so I think that there was a need for a public library for the community to be able to access for not only their children, but for themselves, for continuing education and lifelong learning. And I think that there is a very strong Quaker influence in the community, and the Quakers were always known for being advocates of education. But I think just in general, I think it was just a perfect time as well.
The Wayne Township Library, as it was originally called, had its start on Main Street in the Harris Building. During the first year, it moved across the street to the Keys Building. Eventually, the library moved back to its original location, where it stayed until finally moving off of Main Street in 1954.
It was in the old Harris building down on the corner of North Street and Main Street. The Harris grandson, Harris Mosier, lived there with his family, and the Mosiers rented the front 2 rooms to the library when it was opened in 1917. It sat contiguous to right up on the sidewalk, and the door to the building was just about directly behind where this fire plug is.
The library originally was not a public library, it was an association library, so you had to pay $1 to become a member for the year. When they started, the only money they had was the fees that they collected from becoming an association member. And I think that was probably less than $200. So they needed a place to be, they needed books, they needed furniture, and people in the community stepped up to voluntarily give those things.
If there had been any question of whether the community believed in the value of having a library, that question was clearly answered through their generous response. No section of the community could not be counted as supporters of the library. As one article noted, the youngest association member was only 6 years old, and another lived over 7 miles away. Even the local baseball team played to support the library.
I think that they approached it in the correct way, where they got community buy-in. By going to the community, I think they were saying, we think this is important. If you think this is important as well, you need to join. And they had very good response with people joining up to become part of the association. But I really do feel that, you know, Dr. Mary, the strength of her character really got things off the ground. She got her education in normal school and was a teacher for a while. And then her family moved west, and she was maiden lady, so she moved with them. But the family didn't like it out west, so they moved back. But somehow on that move back eastward, she stayed in Chicago. And she worked during the day as a secretary and then went to evening classes to become a physician. We've got her diploma, which is really interesting to look at because all of the different teachers that she had, all of the different physicians for all of the different parts of the medical practice are all individually signed, so you can see all of the different things that she had to study. And then when she came back here, she stayed here for the rest of her life.
As Dr. Mary's office was right up here in the back of the bank building, and you entered it through this doorway, and her actual office was through this door, and to the left it was right here.
She was my doctor when she was there in the bank building. We lived just north of the bank on the other side of the street. She actually was my doctor that delivered me. And I was her patient for, my childhood years. And she was a wonderful lady. She was just a beautiful person.
She had these piercing blue eyes, and she was only about this high. But when Dr. Mary, who had a very commanding personality, said, "Will you do such and such?" you did it. You didn't ask why, you didn't ask questions. But she was a very kind, loving person.
Mary Cook, from the things that I've ever read about her and the people who do remember her, she was so respected in the community. I think that had to have been part of the, really a driving force in getting things going.
Being the founder of the library, she took an interest in young people. In her doctor's office downtown, for instance, she had her magazine room in her waiting room. And it was just tables of magazines. And she had everything from things that would be interesting to adults to children. And you could go in there and sit while you were waiting and read.
She was elected president of the board, and she was president of the board for 43 years. If you multiplied that all out, that was over 500 meetings that she would have had to have attended during her tenure as president. Someone else counted it up, and of all of those meetings, she only missed 24. So she was, she put her heart and soul into it. She was dedicated to getting it started, and then she was very dedicated to making sure that it was a success.
And a success it was. From the very beginning, the library exceeded expectations. At the end of its first year, there were 300 books in the library's collection. 3 years later, that number had risen to over 1,200. For a while, the library was managed by a volunteer named May Wright. It wasn't until 1925 that the library hired its first paid librarian, Ada Courtney.
I was a Waynesville person. And of course, Waynesville was quite small in the 1930s and 40s. And people knew each other. And I knew Mrs. Courtney. I always called her Ada, I think, even as a child. I knew her as the librarian. And I would go into the library as people would as a child and pick out my books and such, and she would be there to help.
She was a very capable person and a very good librarian, but she was very dour and serious, and she had very little sense of humor.
I was a child, and of course everybody as a child is old. So I remember her as being an old lady. She probably wasn't. But when I knew her in the late 30s and the 40s, I looked at her as an older person. I visualize her now as being dark-haired, small, frail, small, thin, and rather stern. But then again, I was a child.
Ada Courtney was very, very discreet about what kinds of books went into the library, and if there was something that was very, very adult, she had what she called her closed bookcase.
We could browse the shelves as you would today, but there was one stack of standing stack bookcases. So it was small. It was probably no more than 4 foot long and at the most, and probably 3 foot high, probably 3 shelves. And those were books that kids couldn't look at. Now, of course, what that means today, it was probably Mark Twain and those kind of things. But those were, as I could recall, we would browse everything, but not those shelves.
Ada Courtney was known for being a person who was interested in good literature and presenting the best literature she could to the public. I mean, she really was. You've got to give the devil her due. You know? Ada Courtney, and May Wright, were conservative with their money. They got the best that they could get for their money when they bought the books.
Sure. Well, and when you look at, I've been able to go through some of the original board minutes, and the budgets that they had were very, very frugal. And yet it just always amazes me. They kept it going. They just kept persevering, and it just kept going. Yeah.
The strength, the stamina, they stood on their own merits. They were tough.
Oh, they were. They were.
They really were.
Exactly. And as a woman, I'm proud. That's why the library was established in 1917, and at that point in time, women did not have the right to vote. And yet they were driving members in the community. To me personally, it's important to note that women were strong, and they have been through history. And whether or not, you were acknowledged that way, they were really the movers and the shakers in the community in order to get this up and off the ground. And then through the years, if you look through the minutes again, most of the people on the library board were women. It's always been very women-driven. The fact that, they were able to do this and make it successful for 100 years is just a testament to what women can do.
Even at the time, the efforts of those leading the library did not go unnoticed. In a letter sent to the Miami Gazette, they are praised as being faithful and public-spirited. It was clear to the community that those in charge of the library were quite capable. But this capability was about to be challenged.
Funding has always been an issue. When the Great Depression hit, at that point in time, we were getting a little bit of money from the state, but really not a lot to be able to do all of the things that were necessary to be done. But when you start reading the board minutes, you can realize that the Depression really had hit home, and it had hit the library as well. There are several different months where Ada Courtney, who was the librarian at the time, Her salary was $50 a month, but they weren't even able to pay that full. So there were several different months where she was taking $30 or $27. And then there are several notations in there where they're not being able to pay the rent on the rooms that they're using for the library. So it had come home to them, but they persevered through it. So we were still relying on donations and, volunteerism and all of those things. If it wasn't for the community, I don't think the library would have been able to continue. And things did slowly get better. Through the course of the decade, you could see that things started to get better again. But it was definitely something that impacted everyone.
Thanks to the generosity of the community and its tireless management, the library survived the Depression and continued to grow and grow and grow. As the library grew, so did Waynesville. Down on Main Street, things were changing. The road that had once been traveled by horse and buggy now carried automobiles. Things were getting more crowded, more noisy, and even a bit dangerous.
Part of the reason why they finally decided to move was because the space was just getting to be too small. Not everybody was happy about moving off Main Street, and the library board was a little concerned as well. And there were people who were writing in the newspaper at the same time saying that they didn't really like the idea of it moving off of Main Street because it was in the midst of the hustle and bustle of the town. There was so much traffic through here, and I guess at that point in time, 42 as we know it was not there.
No, this was 42, Main Street was 42.
Yeah, you had all of that main traffic. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's an article in the newspaper where evidently a car came rolling down the hill and into the corner of the building. The Miami Gazette, if you've ever looked at it, it's all homey news. Just kind of kept everybody in the loop of what was going on with their neighbors. And this one little article talks about a car came rolling down Main Street, and if you think of Main Street, it does come down on an incline from the north end to the south. And evidently, I don't know what happened, the brake didn't get put on or what, but the car just rolled right into the front windows of the library, totally startling Ada Courtney, who was the librarian at the time. So, the paper went on to reassure you that Ada wasn't hurt, just really a little bit, scared and a little upset. But so I kind of think that she was probably a little happy that they were moving off of Main Street.
In 1954, the old school on the corner of 4th and Miami was closed. The American Legion bought it. Well, they had no use for the first floor, so they rented the library 2 rooms on the south side of the building, and the library moved there.
I started coming to the library when I was probably 3, and so it was the other library down on 4th Street. Our family moved just a block away. My mom took me there, and then when I was 5, I was allowed to walk to school, and I was also allowed to walk to the library by myself.
Now, Joanne, did they have books in each one of the rooms?
The children's room was back here.
There, yeah.
And story time was in the middle of the floor. Any programs I did were in the middle of the floor. Everybody was there to watch.
And they were just a kid. But I always felt like I was getting away with something to come over into the adult section and look at all of them.
Yeah, yeah.
It was big and dark, but you got a sense of belonging there, and it was unlimited books, which was wonderful, so you could just go crazy. Amelia Bedelia was my favorite.
The move to a new location kicked off a period of change for the library. On June 28, 1961, the Wayne Township Library officially became the Mary L. Cook Public Library, bearing the name of the horse and buggy doctor who worked so hard to establish it in recognition of her many years of service. Along with a new location and a new name, the library went through one other change: a new head librarian.
Ada Courtney continued to be the librarian, of course, until she fell and broke a hip, and along came Mary Current.
She was so bubbly. She had red hair, but it wasn't orange red. It was just russet red, and it all curled up all over her head. It was natural. And even though the rooms were dark and old and even musty, when she was in it, everything picked up.
Well, Mary just opened everything up. She was progressive thinking. She was creatively unconventional sometimes.
Well, as a kid, I know she took care of the kids first. The adults could browse. They didn't need a lot of attention, but she liked kids, and so she always made sure that we found. She'd ask us, and what book did you want? Was this for a class, or was this for just reading? And mine was always for reading.
Mary never cared what you read. She always felt that it was reading was the important thing. She said, I don't care if you read comic books, just as long as you read.
It was interesting looking at the board minutes, and you could see that a commitment to the children was there very early on. The first librarian of the library was a volunteer. Her name was May Wright. And in the board meetings, it shows up that they had discussed and they had decided that one evening a week would be set aside for children. There were to be games or stories or whatever the librarian wanted to do for the children. So it was, very evident early on that the kids really were an important part of the community. As you look further on, one of the reasons why they felt the move up to the schoolhouse would be a good thing was because it would be close to the schools, so that the children could walk down to the library with their teachers at different times for different reasons. And that started happening right as soon as they moved up to the old schoolhouse.
There was the front desk. Now the stacks in here were all short.
Yeah.
And this area right in here was open, so this was where the story times and everything were.
Little cozy room.
If there's mama with this crying baby, that was your competition while you were reading a story, because you couldn't send them out anywhere.
Oh, these are the curtains you remember.
Yeah, see, they have blue in them.
Yeah, I wasn't remembering these. I was remembering the other ones.
Yeah.
Don't touch them.
They really are still, they're still,
They're still okay.
you could still use them.
We always encouraged children to come as classes to the library and to attend programs and select books. In fact, Mary Current was probably the first librarian who issued library cards to kindergarten students. People said, why, they can't read? She said, it doesn't make any difference. They can be read too.
Story time, they really dedicated a lot of time and effort to it, and it was a big success. And if you talk to some of the older adults here in the community, they still remember going to the story times and to the summer reading programs. And there's wonderful pictures in the newspapers of, the different things that they did.
Mary put on the first of our wonderful reading clubs. It was the Polka Dot Clown. And she had someone paint a very bright clown on a big piece of wallboard. And then for every 10 books that we read, we got a construction paper polka dot of different colors with our name on it. And it would be put on the clown. That was just the beginning of some wonderful reading clubs that really encouraged children to come to the library, discover the world of books and literature, and to read, read, read.
You can see it nowadays with us having summer reading program themes. Even back at that point in time, she would pick a theme and she would have different things going on. They did summer theater with the kids. They did all kinds of arts and crafts with the children. And when you read some of the things that Mary Current said, one of the stated purposes that she felt was so important was to let the kids keep their reading skills through the summer. And that still is the driving force for us when we do summer reading program, is to make sure that the kids have fun, but they also maintain those skills so that when they go back to school in the fall, they're ready to learn and they haven't lost anything that they had accomplished in the year before. Well, the library in the 80s was still occupying the first floor of the old schoolhouse. And that was at the time that they decided to start looking for a space of their own. If you've been to the old schoolhouse or even just looked at the old schoolhouse, you would note that there are some things that could have been better. First off, they were running out of space. That seemed to be, their collections were growing, their circulation was growing, the population was growing.
We had completely, at that time, outgrown the first floor of the old school building. The library had taken in the whole floor. We had the 4 rooms plus the enclosed lobby, which had been the hallway, entrance hall of the school. We had no storage space. We had no place to grow.
It was also not handicap accessible, and that was becoming an issue. There were different things coming down from the federal government as to handicap accessibility, so there were issues with that. And there were discussions with the Legion, who owned the building that we leased from, and so there were ongoing discussions about who needed to be responsible for what repairs and all of those kinds of issues. And the library board finally decided, well, maybe this is the moment that we need to be thinking of having a building that is truly suited for a library.
My mother was on the board of directors here when they moved from down at the old schoolhouse up to here. She was a teacher all of her life, and she was dedicated to the thought that everybody should read and have the benefits of the library. So
when this library was built, the entire board was women. They had never done something like this, and they pushed through a bond issue on the ballot. They dealt with architects and with general contractors to bring this building into being, and it was basically a little old lady board for the most part.
she went through all of the headaches that they went in getting it up here, going through the zoning and all of that things. It was kind of a collaborative effort because they knew that they couldn't just do it on what funds they had, so they had understood from other libraries in the area, like I said, that they needed more money. So
they looked at different properties and they located this property, but they did need money. And so they took the step of wanting to do a bond issue.
Well, that was easier said than done. There were people that really believed in it and wanted it very badly and could see the advantages. But at the same time, there were influential people around town that didn't see the need for it and worked against it. There were people that just didn't think that we needed to spend all that kind of money. We had a perfectly good library down there in the American Legion building. We didn't need anything any bigger. Luckily, we had people that were really, really for it, that really helped, that were in the position to help with their influence.
We needed to get out to the public why we wanted to do this. So at that point in time, the Friends of the Library came into being. And so they started with doing some publicity for us and getting out and getting the word to the people in the community and the people that we served, that this was why we wanted to do what we wanted to do. It was received well by, the people who vote, and we were able to pass the bond issue so we could move forward with the building.
For the first time in its history, the Mary L. Cook Library had a building of its own. They had certainly reached a milestone, but they were far from done.
Even when they first moved into the first building, the library board was very forward-thinking. They knew that this was a first step, but they really felt strongly that this wouldn't be the last step. So they started a building fund right away. So that building fund was able to grow.
As the building fund grew, so did the library itself. The years that followed were a period of continued success and significant change for the library.
In the mid-90s, we got our first computers. We got our first internet computer, and I can still remember it. We had like this hexagonal piece of furniture, and there were 3 computers. And, we just thought it was the most fantastic thing in the world. It really changed the way library service was offered. Computers, they take up a lot of space, and with people wanting to come in and use free internet access and things, we needed to have some space to be able to provide those kinds of services to the community. So we knew we needed to grow as well. So fortunately, we had our building fund to be able to do that. And we decided that we needed a bigger children's area. That was one of the first things that we really knew. And we also wanted some dedicated space for the teens. The young adult books were growing. That was kind of a new thing. We needed a space for them to feel comfortable to come into the library. We wanted also a bigger community room. We were becoming and wanted to become more of a community center, so we needed places that people could come in and we could host programs, and then other groups in the community could use that space as well. We also needed some dedicated space for the staff. With having computers, what happens when a computer breaks down? What happens when the internet goes down? You needed new staff to be able to handle those issues. So we were able to complete that addition. But then we started to realize that maybe we really needed more children's space. We approached the Career Center to see if they would be interested, and they were. We ended up with an absolutely gorgeous children's room, and one that is, well used. You see kids down there all the time, and it's a great collection, and it's a gorgeous room.
The library today is a place of continued growth.
In 100 years, I think that it's remarkable how a small township library in a rural area grew from 2 rooms into what we have today that attracts so many people.
Technology is changing so quickly, and the needs of people are changing so quickly, and we're able to keep up with that. And so I guess that's probably the thing I'm proudest of, is that for a small library, we offer such wonderful services. I really think that we offer services on a par with many of the larger libraries around us. And so I think that, we can offer to our community what other bigger communities are able to access as well.
Everyone here contribute so much of themselves. I think they feel free to share their passions and what they like to do and their thoughts on things. And, if they see a problem, they're willing to speak up about it. And we're always trying to change and advance and make it better.
That is a huge part of the library. The people who come into the building to work every day are truly dedicated to, providing good service to the community. And they're always looking for new things and new ideas and new ways to do things and things to be able to offer to the people that are coming through our doors or people who potentially are coming through our doors.
The library has always been able to provide just exactly what people need. And the people, of course, have become so important to the library because they've become a part of a family. I think the library has always been the heart of the community.
I think originally the idea was the library was there to sort of guide the community and help them have great literature, give them good reading materials. But now I think it's more that we try to address what the community wants. And so they're really the experts. We are not the experts anymore, which is how I think it used to be. So we really just want to know what they want, what the community wants, what they're interested in, and we try to fulfill that.
So what are these? It's part of the dome. The dome? So the library's in a dome?
Yeah.
That's cool.
I suggest maybe trying to make a support. I'm worried when you try to put the file in place, it's going to fall.
Today, I'm going to ask you to build what you think the library will look like in the future.
I hope this library will always handle books.
There is bookshelves. They're big bookshelves. They hold 1,000 books. There's chairs. They slide around. A window. Here's where you check out your book. You slide the book in there and they check it out for you and slide it back out. And you have to turn this five times both ways. And then it opens up, pops up. You don't have to do it.
I hope that we will never lose sight of the printed word, the importance of the printed word. And we may have lots of computers and we may have recorded books, but we will always have a paper book with ink print. It becomes a part of you.
So it's a library for only wizards. And she's drinking some liquid luck, which is supposed to make you lucky. And these are all the books that are on all the different spells. Ooh. And there are 2 robots that are magically created to do the work. And here's the satellite dish that fell off.
So I can see as libraries change and technology changes, I think that I hope and I feel very confident that the library will be able to change with it, and not throw away the books, because I think they're always going to be a permanent part of the library. But there are other things as well that need to be, offered and available to the people who live here. And that's what I hope, is that we can continue to do that.
And then this is a helpful robot. Look. He has a grabber. And then he can just put the books back. And then we have the bathroom. This makes it so when you flush, you have to push that, and then it will just flush and it will turn. Here's a video camera like you have.
Things are changing so much, and a lot of the focus is moving out towards the community and going out in the community, not staying in the building. And so I think that is a huge drive, and I'm not sure really how that's going to shake out but I think it's really exciting. And it's really interesting to go out and talk to people and see what they want from the town. Because sometimes the library can fulfill that in some way.
It is going to be highly overpowered explosives.
Can you tell us all that you have in here?
So I have 2 targets, 3 blades, and I don't know what that is, a missile with a blade on it, and trap doors. And here's a satellite dish, a missile with a blade on it, and another satellite dish, and the rest is just guns.
Well, I think a lot of it goes back to the fact that we have such a wonderful creative staff who are dedicated to providing the best library service that we possibly can. But I think because we're a local staff, we have kind of, for lack of a better way to say it, a finger on the pulse of the community. So we have some insight into what the community needs and what the community wants because we live here. If you're invested in your community, you want the best for your community.
Ultimately, I think it's service, that it's not just reading, it's bigger than that. It's education and encouragement and enthusiasm and curiosity, all of those things. I think that that's what we provide to people.
This guy's supposed to be standing on like a secret portal with 3D glasses on, which sends him to missions to fight. And then in here, kids are just playing like hide and seek and stuff. Oh, here's their secret plans. Right here, they're gonna build the pyramid, but all better.
The pyramid will be better,
Yeah.
new and improved.
This library will always be here. I'm sure it's going to expand even further into the future. I hope I'm still around when it does and can see the next stage of changes.
I think it's perfect now. It can't help but grow. So you may have to add on again. It's a wonder. This library is just beautiful. It's just, we brag about it all the time. Well, you should see our library. Come see our library.
So, and then this is the fish tank if they're coming. Level this up.
The fish tank is in the library.
Yeah.
And what is this here?
That is something that when they have a book, they can scan it through there. And it goes to here, it goes in here, and then it goes back to the workers' space. So, and the workers put it back.
Put back on the shelf for somebody else.
Hopefully this library will be serving this community in a wide variety of ways, you know, for years and years to come. You know, I stop and think about if Dr. Mary could have would walk into the building today. I think she would be proud because I think that, you know, she really took a leap of faith to get the building and the whole idea going for the community. And I think the fact that we serve the community so well, I think that would really make her proud.